I'm Peter Geoghegan, a journalist who has written about Northern Ireland for about a decade, and this is the first of 5 short reports on community reconciliation and peacebuilding in Belfast. I'm starting with a look at 2 men from very different backgrounds who are now working closely together. Let's join them while they show a group of students around some of the successes in the New Lodge and Tigers Bay in North Belfast.
Just introduce myself first. I'm John Howcroft. I'm a former Loyalist prisoner. A lot of people that work together on this interface will be from a Loyalist or Republican background, obviously. You're about to enter Tigers Bay. Don't be afraid. It's a small enclave, a small Protestant community. The violence was so bad in this interface at one time that they decided to do away with them houses. There's over 700 houses in there. Create them business parks as a buffer zone between both communities to stop the violence. So bad it was, there's people died on this interface. But we've made a transition now, and there's a lot of young people working together now on these interfaces. They don't tend to have the same baggage with them as my generation had. We get a specific parade up this on a biannual basis, which would be called the Tour of the North. It's an orange parade. And the last 5 years there hasn't been one bit of trouble at it. Both communities manage it very well and make sure that it doesn't descend into violence as it used to in the past. Because the reality is, we work together in this interface 365 days a year, and we're not going to let one day destroy everything that we've built. I'll just take you through Tigers Bay now.
When the tour reaches Alexandra Park, John Loughran, who lives and works in the New Lodge, takes over the story.
We're in one of Belfast City Council's marvellous parks, a marvellous open public space. And when I was a child growing up, it was always a place of contest and division and confrontation. And part of that, a number of years back, a peace wall went up in the middle of a public park.
That was erected in September 1994, the day after the IRA ceasefire was announced. So even though peace was breaking out, if you want to put it that way, there was often serious rioting in this park between either side of the community. So that's why the fence was put up.
That is Kieran Shannon, project worker in Groundwork, one of the key organisations transforming the environment around here.
About 4 years ago, Groundwork had got some money through the European Union to do work in the park. I think it was almost like a throwaway comment that somebody said, why don't we put a gate in the fence? And that sort of snowballed from that.
And because a lot of the work and the imagination, the guys facilitated the process with residents working with Groundwork, North Belfast Community Development and Transition Group, the Interface Network, Intercom.
Everybody was in favour of this, so we put the gate in about 2.5 years ago. The day it opened, there was an awful lot of people from down there who hadn't been up in this part of the park, and people up here who hadn't been in that part of the park for years, were walking back and forwards through it. And it was almost surreal. There were people standing there with their mouths open and looking at this gate in the park, So
there's now a situation where the gate's open, and almost it's in Aladdin's garden. Like, people take a huge amount of risks around a lot of this stuff, but it begins to create a space whereby people can come and feel safe. And despite all the naysayers or the resistance, there is no confrontation.
Not that all interfaces are ready for gates to be installed, still less to be pulled down completely.
Typically in Tigers Bay, you're surrounded on 3 sides by interface barriers. It affects your mobility, where you're able to go. People from here couldn't walk 30 yards that way into the New Lodge. They can't walk 10, 15 yards that way into Newington. And because of the history of internecine warfare between different loyalist factions, they can't walk 400 yards that way. That's Catholic houses just behind that barrier, where these are their Protestant houses. That's a big challenge, because it's okay addressing a public park, an interface barrier, but there's an intimacy to that kind of conflict architecture when houses are directly facing each other if that structure is removed. The fear of violence, the memory of it, is still strong among local people. The psychological barriers are much more insurmountable than the physical barriers. So we began a process 7 years ago to begin to address the psychological barriers between people. We've had a good lot of success in that.
Not far away is part of the answer, a shared housing project called Delaware House.
There's 11 Protestant families and 11 Catholic families live side by side in this building. They formed their own residence group, and they're now stakeholders in this interface. You'll see the interface cameras still in front of it. Just to say how bad it actually was here, there was one famous Christmas Day riot here when young people should have been opening their presents we're trying to kill each other in this interface with the snow on the ground. It doesn't happen now.
It wasn't always like this. What seems very normal here now is built on years and years of hard work. Almost 25% of people who lost their lives in the conflict in this part of the country did so within a square mile here. So when we're talking about conflict, it happened here. When we're talking about lives lost, it happened here. And we're talking about fear, it happened here. So this was a war zone. Derelict, decayed. And what you now begin to see is a number of family homes. And the only way you begin to consolidate and build a peace is at the local level. So people who live here have a vested interest in this place being safe. What's particularly significant here is that people from a loyalist background, people from a Republican background are beginning to work together to shape the peace at a local level. And I think that's really, really important.
In part 2 of this series, we'll be visiting some of the other people working on a cross-community basis across Belfast.